Greetings, Rigil Agateiades here and welcome to my comprehensive guide to Ursarctics. In this video I will introduce the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, the combos in the deck, and finally and most importantly, the opponent specific interactions in the current meta one would need to know using Ursarctics such as chain blocking. But first of all, a basic run through of the cards in the Ursarctic lineup. There are two types of monsters in the main deck, level 7 non-tuner monsters or level 8 tuner monsters. They all special themselves from the hand by attributing a level 7 or higher monster as cost, and have a trigger effect when they are special summoned. The level 7 non-tuners have effects that help summon the level 8 tuners. Mcpolar adds an Ursarctic monster from the deck. Mctanus adds an Ursarctic monster from the graveyard, and the Mcbillis special summons an Ursarctic monster from the hand. The level 8 tuners have effects that interact with the opponent. Megapolar pops a spell trap, Megatanus flips a monster face down, and the Mcbillis banishes a card from the opponent's graveyard. The thing that makes Ursarctics special is how their summoning effects, and hence their trigger effects as well, can be activated in either player's main phase, essentially making them a very costly hand trap. It is also worth noting that their on-summon effects lock you to summoning monsters with a level only. We will discuss the strengths and weaknesses of doing so later. In the extra deck, there are currently 3 synchro monsters and a fusion monster. First, the synchros. They cannot be synchro summoned. Instead, they are summoned by sending monsters from the field to the grave, whose level difference is equal to the monster in the extra deck. Ursarctic Polari is the linchpin of the deck. A level 1 synchro monster, it can be summoned by sending a level 7 monster and a level 8 tuner to the grave. It searches the Archetype field spell, and special summons an Ursarctic monster from the grave by tributing a level 7 or higher monster on the field as cost. Its being a level 1 synchro non-tuner monster is very important, because it is practically the only way to summon the other 2 synchro monsters. The other 2 synchro monsters are level 7, and can only be summoned by sending a level 8 or higher tuner, and a non-tuner synchro monster whose level difference is 7. The easiest way to summon them is using Ursarctic Polari and a level 8 tuner. Ursarctic Septentrion is the cover monster for the archetype with 2 effects. Its first effect negates the effects of all face-up monsters special summoned from the extra deck with no levels. The second effect searches an Ursarctic card when the opponent special summons a monster. Ursarctic Grand Chariot is what you usually summon because of many reasons. When it is special summoned, it targets and destroys 2 cards on the field. It also has a second effect that negates the activation of an effect that targets an Ursarctic card you control, by tributing a monster from your hand or field. This can be any monster and not just a level 7 or higher monster. Both effects are extremely versatile. There are also 5 Ursarctic spells. Ursarctic Big Dipper is the Archetype field spell, and it is as important as Polari in this deck. Once per turn, it can replace the cost of an Ursarctic monster's effect by banishing a level 7 or higher Ursarctic monster from the graveyard. It also places a counter on itself whenever a monster is special summoned. After the 7th counter, it can remove all counters on itself to target a monster your opponent controls and take control of it. There are no restrictions on that monster, and you can use it any way you want. Ursarctic Departure, nicknamed the Melody of Awakening Bears, has an effect identical to the Melody of Awakening Dragon. By discarding a card, add 2 Ursarctic monsters from the deck to your hand. It can also banish itself from the grave to replace the cost of an Ursarctic monster's effect, but you cannot use this effect the turn it is sent to the graveyard. Ursarctic Slider is a quick play monster reborn for the deck. It can also summon banished Ursarctic monsters, but in both cases they would be destroyed during the end phase, and for the rest of the turn you cannot special summon monsters without a level. Ursarctic Radiation is the card that brings the deck from barely functioning to sometimes winning. When it is activated, it puts 7 counters on itself. Every time an Ursarctic monster is summoned from the hand or extra deck, you can remove a counter and draw a card. This effect is not once per turn. which means you can draw 7 cards in one turn. I don't think I have to explain how strong that is. The last spell is part of the Drytron half of the deck. Konami decided Drytrons and Ursarctics would come under the same lore, and hence there are, and will be, more cards that bring the two archetypes together. Ursarctic Drytron, literally the two archetypes' names joined together, is a fusion spell that fuses using the two field spells in the two archetypes. Using Ursarctic Big Dipper and Drytron Fafnir as material, it special summons ultimate flagship Ursarctron from the extra deck. If Polari or Drytron Alpha Fuben is on the field, you can banish one of the two field spells from the deck instead. It also comes with the cost replacing effect seen on Ursarctic Departure, but can be used the turn it is sent to the graveyard, which is more convenient. The fusion monster it summons is ultimate flagship Ursarctron, a level 7 fusion monster. When another effect monster is summoned to your field, it searches an Ursarctic or Drytron monster from the deck. It also comes with an ignition effect to add one banished Ursarctic or Drytron monster to the hand. This means it can add at most 3 monsters to the hand over one turn handover. Now to the strengths and weaknesses of the deck. First, the strengths. The main deck monsters can act as hand traps, allowing you to play even when your opponent goes first. A Megatanus flip can shut down a number of decks, making your second turn much easier. Megapolar can pop a set card even before it can activate, just like the end phase MST in the early days of the game. Being able to summon on either player's turn also gives the deck a lot of flexibility, such as simply passing the turn if they max C, and play on the next. Their toolbox is also reasonably versatile. An MST, a Book of Moon, and a DD Crow can answer most threats in the game. As long as it knocks anything like towers and such, Ursarctics can almost always put up a fight. On top of all of that, Septentrion's skill drain effect is extremely powerful. It can completely shut down Link and Ixie decks on its own. The numerous weaknesses, however, are why the deck does not see a lot of play. The main deck monsters all require a tribute to summon itself, which is a -1 in card advantage. It takes 3 cards in the hand just to summon a single synchro monster. And that is usually where your turn ends. Even though you have answers to most threats, it might take you way too much resources to do so, and you lose the duel. The strengths of the deck also easily turns on itself. If you summon everything on the opponent's turn, your opponent can simply use Raigeki to wipe your field, or draw 2 cards of Triple Tactics Talents. Either way, it is a severe loss to you. Septentrion also does nothing to synchro decks or fusion decks, which is at least half of the meta. The final, most hindering weakness is the lack of destruction protection. A good Raigeki or Lightning Storm can easily wipe your field. For Christ's sake, even Smashing Ground can't do it. And when that happens, you essentially lose 3 cards in your hand, which you used to summon the synchro monster. There are other cards you can run to help the deck. There are a lot of them, in fact. I'll just list them in the descriptions, but the ones that you definitely want to consider are Dinowrestler Pancratops, Tenyi Spirit Vishuddha, and True King Barastos. Dinowrestler Pancratops, Tenyi Spirit Vishuddha, and True King Barastos are all cards that removes a threat on the opponent's field while potentially doubling as a small bear in a combo. Barastos, while extremely costly, can remove 2 back row without targeting or destroying them, which is useful against runics. And it will always stay on the field as a small bear after use, unlike the other 2. And this brings us to the combos. Thankfully, the combos in the deck aren't that hard. All combos require 3 cards, a level 7 bear, a level 8 bear, or an anti-tribute if the small bear is Megapolar, and a tribute. Summon the level 7 bear first. If it is Mectanus, tribute the level 8 bear as cost, and add it back to the hand with Mectanus' effect. If it is Mecbilis, tribute the other tribute. Then, summon the level 8 bear, either with its own effect or Mecbilis' effect. with a level 7 and a level 8 bear on the field, summon Ursarctic Polari and use this effect to search Big Dipper. Here, use Polari's second effect. Banish the small bear from the graveyard as cost using Big Dipper, and summon the big bear. Now you can summon the level 7 synchro of your choice to your field, and that's it. What you get with this combo is a level 7 synchro, a Big Dipper, and a level 8 bear's effect used on the way. If the third tribute is a level 8 bear as well, you can use 2 of such effects in one turn. You also have a Big Dipper with 2 counters on it, so your opponent needs to answer in some way within 5 special summons. If you have other bears in your hand, you can reduce that even further. If you want to use a non-Ursarctic monster to replace the first small bear, remember the third tribute has to be an Ursarctic monster as well, for example Pancratops and 2 level 8 bears, otherwise you won't have a card to banish to activate Polari's second effect. Finally, we get to the most important section, the specific interactions. Ursarctics, unlike other decks, are really specific when it comes to playing correctly. The order in which you summon the bears, the card you choose to tribute first, all makes the difference between winning and losing the game. Playing on your opponent's first turn. The first thing you have to choose is whether to play on your opponent's turn or not. If your opponent is likely to have anything to destroy the 2 bears, it is almost always not worth risking it. There are a few mashups where playing on their turn might work. Firstly, Sprites. When they normal summon their first level 2 monster, you may use Megatanus to flip it face down, and usually they won't be able to continue their turn. Runic Sprites, however, would usually easily summon another level 2 and continue their combo there. Then we have Sword Souls. If you think your opponent does not have access to Long One, you can use Megatanus on the Moyi or Taya normal summon. If they did have the Long One, however, you are likely to lose a bear while also having to stare down on a Baron, a position in which you are unlikely to win from. If you have a card to handle a T-Sao before you use Polari, such as Pancratops, you can hold off the Megatanus for Long One, which is a much safer play while preventing them from finishing the latter half of their T-Sao Baron board. There are also many other decks a Megatanus flip can stop completely. It is fine to do so, as long as you are sure your monsters won't get popped. Other than Megatanus, Megabilis might also stop combos. Most notably, if you activate Megabilis' summon effect as Chainlink 2 to Branded Fusion, you can banish the Scent Fallen of Albaz when their fusion monster activates this effect to fusion summon once again. This will only work if they summon Albion though, because Lubellion can also use banished monsters as fusion material, but they will be forced to go into Albion if they don't have a discard for it. Now that the first turn is over, the second consideration you have to make is the most common threats. Hand traps. The ones we can avoid are Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, Caught by the Grave, and Max C. Against Ash Blossom, what I like to do is use Mekpola first to bait the Ash, before I activate Ursarctic Departure, so I lose one less card after the Ash Blossom. Against Caught by the Grave, avoid using a monster with the same name as a monster in your graveyard so it cannot be negated. When we think our opponent has a Max C, don't use Mekabilis as the first level 7. Using Mekpola or Mektanus gives you the option of stopping your turn without losing anything but Mekabilis summons from the hand on summon, and not using that effect means your other level 8 bear will need another tribute to summon, which is essentially a -1. There isn't much we can do against an infinite impermanence, but we always try to Megapolar back row before we go into Polari, to force out an imperm as much as possible. With the extra freedom given to Ursarctics, we can chain multiple summon effects together, resulting in multiple on-summon effects happening in one chain, allowing us to chain block effects we want to resolve. For example, we can activate Mekpola and Megapola's summon effect in the same chain. When they both get summoned, their on-summon effects have to activate in a single chain, and you can choose to chain Mekpola Chainlink 1 and Megapola Chainlink 2. This way, they cannot use Ash Blossom on Megapola, as Megapola effectively chain blocked the Ash. Chain linking with 2 monsters is a costly move, but we can also do it with other cards. Ursarctic Radiation and Ursarctic Big Dipper's second effect both trigger when an Ursarctic monster is special summoned, so they can be used to chain block the monster's effect, or vice versa. This is particularly useful when the opponent prefers a spell or trap negate to stop Big Dipper from stealing their monsters. By chaining the on-summon effect of a bear, you can chain block the spell trap negate and steal that monster instead. Another important thing is to use the appropriate tribute, or method to replace the tribute. The priority goes as Big Dipper, Departure or Drytron, and then the hand. Big Dipper is always first priority to use, because it is the easiest to lose. A Twin Twister, a Harpy's Feather Duster, it can easily be destroyed and you can't do anything about that. Then we have Departure or Drytron in the grave. This can be targeted by something like Lady Crow or Exorcisters, in the latter's case in order to avoid triggering their summoning effects when a card moves out of the grave. We always avoid using cards in the hand as tribute, as keeping them in our hand leaves us with more options. Be aware that Polari has to use one of the cost replacement effects, as you cannot tribute a monster from the hand to use it. Finally, this doesn't come up often, but sometimes we already used our level 8 summoning effect, but need another level 8 bear with the same name on the field. In these situations, or if you predict that this would happen, Mechabilis is the small bear you would want to use, as it saves up the once per turn summoning effect of the level 8s. If we managed to overcome our opponent's board, the final step is to stop them from rebuilding one. Septentrion is very good at doing so against an Ixie or Link deck, but you have to be very careful. Septentrion only negates the monsters that are special summoned from the extra deck, with no level. If you flipped one face down with Megatanus the previous turn, it counts as a flip summon and no longer negates its effect, so make sure you get rid of the face down monster you flipped. And finally, against Runics, always end on Grand Chariot. Grand Chariot's protection effect negates the activation of a card, not the effect. If they use Freezing Curse or Flashing Fire, the activation would be negated, and Runic Fountain would not trigger. This -1 to them can often swing the entire duel to your favor. Before I end my video, I want to discuss what I cannot possibly include entirely in this video, all the other level 7 or higher monsters in the game. I mentioned Dino Wrestler Pancratops and Barastos, but due to the nature of the deck, almost any level 7 or higher monsters can be used, and they can completely change the way you play the deck. The method I personally prefer the most is to run Lava Golem and Sphere modes to wipe the opponent's board completely, while not doing anything on the opponent's first turn. I will make a separate video to discuss my personal choices as well as the card ratios, which are mostly just a personal preference thing. With such a wide pool of monsters, I cannot simply tell you which way is the best, and the ideal playstyle definitely changes with the meta. So I will leave that part to you. Experiment with all the level 7 or higher monsters out there and find your own path. And finally, may the heart of the cards be with you always.